Obviously kind of old news at this point, but there were 3 WWE releases on Friday right before SmackDown. Like I said, they taped SmackDown. So these 3 individuals were all SmackDown superstars, but they were not at work because they taped the show a week earlier. One of those individuals was actually on the show that same night, that being Indi Hartwell. They taped the match the week earlier at the Barclays Center. But Indi Hartwell got cut, Tegan Nox got cut, Baron Corbin got cut. Tegan has not been on the show in many months. Indi was just on the show on Friday. Baron Corbin has not had a regular role on the main roster since he got brought back to the main roster in the spring draft. But he's still had a presence on the show once in a while, and he's been in that company for a very long fucking time. I got my thoughts on these, but I want to start with you, Mr. Marceau. What were your top takeaways from the latest round of releases from WWE?
Kid always starts with me first. I saw it, and I think I like Tegan, I like Indi. Corbin, he just got back to the main roster, so it wasn't glad that he's gone or anything, but, I don't know, it's one of those situations, especially with, at least for Indi, they were using her a little bit. Tegan Nox, they never even really used her, so, they called her, I don't even know if she went back down to NXT, but regardless, she was never really used once she was on the main roster again. She did the whole thing with Natty, and then, I don't know if she got hurt or whatever, and then we really didn't see her again, and then they brought her back, and then, I don't know, I just feel like with her specifically, I think I probably feel the worst for her because I feel like she never really had a real chance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Indi did anything wrong, or, I feel like you said she was on TV weekly, so not exactly sure where that came from, but at least with who am I thinking of? Fucking, what's her
Candice
face?
LeRae?
No, not Candice LeRae. With Tegan, like you said, she was not even on the show, so, she didn't even have a chance to, even show what she had.
Yeah.
At least Indi was on the show with Candice, doing something. Corbin, he was teaming up with Apollo Crews. I feel like if you're teaming up with Apollo Crews, it's not the
the writing's on the wall at that point.
While, yeah, I feel bad for Tegan. I like Indi as well. I just feel like probably both of them just never either got over, or they just didn't see them ever getting over to a certain point. I feel like they could have been probably like what Liv Morgan was probably 5 years ago. She was basically just another woman on the roster. Came back, people liked her, and it kind of went off from there. So, unfortunately, it's just they have a ton of women as it is. They don't see it now, and they don't really see it in the future. I think that's kind of what's the decision making, and it sucks because I think they're both good in their specific ways. But like I said, if you're just another woman at the end of the day, you're going to be on the chopping block, unfortunately.
Yeah, with specifically Indi and Tegan, I think with Indi, it was interesting because it wasn't like she was a top-tier player on the show, but she was on the show. She had just returned to television alongside Candice. They were not on the show for months. So, the Tegan one is probably the least surprising because she has not been on the show since she was drafted to SmackDown in April. She has not sniffed television time at all. In an enhancement match, she wasn't even on fucking WWE Speed. So I think they made up their minds a long time ago that she was probably on the chopping block. That being said, though, it does still surprise me to the point that you made, and it is refreshing to hear you say that, just because they never really gave her a chance. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm a big Tegan Nox fan, always have been. But, what doesn't make sense to me, because all I hear is this narrative she was injury prone. I'm not saying she wasn't, because she did have at least 2 or 3 different ACL tears. But the point is, all of those injuries happened while she was in NXT. And then they fired her in late 2021. So you can make the case at that point. Again, she was called up that summer. They didn't even fucking try. They fired her within months. She had maybe 2 TV matches and they fired her. So there really wasn't any reason to get rid of her then. It wasn't like she got hurt again and then they fired her. That wasn't the case. They fired her back in 2021. They brought her back over a year later. Triple H did under his new regime. And again, they did nothing with her. She was on TV a little bit about a year ago. She had challenged Becky, I think, for the NXT Women's Championship, I believe, on Raw. And she had a couple of matches, and she started teaming with Natalya, and they were doing a story there that really wasn't overly interesting. There was never really a formal split, and then they just fucking scrapped it, and then she was off the show. And as soon as she got moved to SmackDown, I'm thinking she's done. Because at least on Raw, she can get TV time on Main Event or something. They don't have that with SmackDown, so she was kind of fucked at that point. But she didn't suffer, to my knowledge, a single injury in that time. It wasn't like she got injured back in the spring. They just didn't even really try. So, again, for as great of a job as Triple H has done of kind of turning things around creatively, I think one of my things with this, and again, Tegan Nox was not the next, Charlotte, but she was also seen as a top prospect when they hired her back in 2017 or whatever for the Mae Young Classic, and she was getting some shit done in NXT in that feud with Dakota Kai, and they worked really well together. She was kind of building momentum there. I think she had challenged for the NXT Women's Championship at one point against I think Io Sky. I think they had a match at one point for the title on TV. But yeah, she's one of those people, like, I guess you can make the case for, like, Emma as well. But she was, again, never really going to be someone they focused on. Where they bring some of these people back, don't do anything with them, and then they let them go anyway, despite the fact they brought them back. Like, with Hit Row, I can kind of get it, because that shit wasn't getting over. But with Tegan, I feel like their biggest crime with her was that they didn't even really try to get her over in front of a main roster audience.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think she had that little feud with Becky, or was on Raw, and then it was with Natalya. But besides that, we didn't really see much of her. It's just, I don't know. Like you said, I think it's just more the fact that maybe you take the roster, you look at it, and you're like, what are we seeing these people? And then kind of go from there. Like I said, I think she had a good future, and then like you said, she did get hurt a few times. But I mean, not like I'm like fire her too, but like I don't know. I feel like her and Dakota Kai are pretty much, to me, are the same person. I mean, obviously Dakota was associated with Damage Control, but I mean, Tegan was kind of just floating in the river. I mean, not like she really was doing much, but like I said, they also didn't really give her that many opportunities. So it's just one of those things. I think Emma's actually a really good comparison. I think she's good. Just really, once she got to the main roster, just really didn't have that fan affair and wasn't over at all. So then they're just like looking at it like, what are we doing with this person? They're not associated with anyone. We'll just move on. And unfortunately, that's what happened with her.
Yeah, and it's not even a case of, like, every single person they've let go in, like, the last year, I would say, oh, man, that's a waste of talent. Oh, they really dropped the ball with that individual. Because that's kind of a common criticism that certain people have just in general. Like, oh, every single person that got fired, WWE dropped the ball with. No, I mean, there's a lot of different circumstances for a lot of different people. Tegan Nox was not, completely blameless. She could have gotten over a little bit quicker than she did, or, just not gotten injured, which isn't really something you can control, but shit happens. It wasn't like she had a perfect run and they let go of her. There were reasons there, but I still feel like they could have done more on that front. But, they let go a whole bunch of people about a year ago, like the Dolph Ziggler group where they let go of him. He wanted his release. That was a bit of a different story, but Ziggler, Top Dollar they got rid of. People like that. Mustafa Ali was around that point, and a few others as well. Those were guys they were not going to do anything with. Elias, people like that was someone, when we talked about it at the time, people were crying, oh man, they really dropped the ball with Elias. I mean, bro, he was there for a fucking decade, and I like Elias a lot. But he's a guy that it's like, what more were you going to do with him, especially in the Triple H era where they really weren't going to focus on characters like that. That to me was fucking stupid. And I enjoyed Elias, but the fact that he got cut was not like overly disappointing. It was like, okay, yeah, it was kind of time for him to move on, and he hasn't really done much since on a major platform. I haven't seen him in TNA or whatever, so I don't really know what he's doing now. The Indi one surprised me just because, like I said, she was back on TV, and again, she wasn't someone you were going to put the WWE Women's title on, I don't think, and I think she's great, and obviously I'm biased because I've known her for a long time, but, I just feel like they had called her up about a year and a half ago, and I don't know, they didn't really give her much of a chance, and they had turned them heel earlier this year, and I don't know, I just thought there was more to that than, I don't know, like they put her in Australia, they gave her that moment in Australia for the WWE Tag Team Women's titles, and then they, then 6 months later they fire her. It's like, I don't know, if you want to build up this tag team division, you would think they would hold on to her, but I guess not. So that was disappointing. The Baron Corbin one is interesting. I know you talked a little bit about him as well. Listen, I just feel like the timing is interesting. I think Baron Corbin is great. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they dropped the ball big time, but between both creative regimes, I feel like they did drop the ball. In the sense that during the Vince regime, they had buried him so much to the point with different characters and the booking, the failed cash-in, all this other sort of shit. It was almost like the point of no return. But yet, under the Triple H regime, I mean, when he first took over, they did the JBL pairing, which sucked. But then he was brought back to NXT, had a great redemption run there. It's like, okay, cool, I want to see this Baron Corbin on the main roster. They do nothing with him and let him go. So, do you think with Baron Corbin the damage was done under the Vince regime to the point where Triple H could not have possibly done anything else with him? Or did Triple H also drop the ball and not at least trying to make that version of Baron Corbin work this year on the main roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I think all the stuff from Vince, I feel like definitely didn't help. I feel like with him, I feel like he's so similar to Cross. It's like maybe they didn't want to have someone that's so like gimmicky, like
Mm-hmm.
obviously crossed a little bit different, but I feel like they're similar in certain aspects. And maybe it just like you said, they called him up and did literally nothing. He was teaming with Apollo Crews.
Yeah.
It's like
dijecting. They
I don't know if they could just get the stench off of him with Vince and stuff, but I think, like you said, I wouldn't say like people are like, oh, they dropped the ball with him. I think he was good, and his career was probably way better than anyone really anticipated. I mean, at first he was doing 10-second like literally squashing people in 10 seconds on NXT, and then like turned into something like you said. He was on WrestleMania. Like he had some good programs. Like he was on the main roster. I don't know how many belts he really won, if he won any, but I mean, I don't know. I think he had a decent career, but I think it's also hard to get past all the stuff. Like when he came up with NXT, I think if that was now, it would have worked, but he's also been in the company for so long that once he started doing like the happy horse shit, like it kind of went out the window from there.
That's the thing. Like when Triple H first took over, and they tried the JBL thing, and it was awful. As soon as JBL dumped him, the guy was out there in like fucking basketball shorts. I'm thinking, what are we doing here? Like they had at this point, if the guy got cut tomorrow, you never want to see anyone get cut. I say that all the time, but it's like, would anyone have really given a shit? Because at that point, Baron Corbin was just another guy on the roster to the point where he was just a fucking loser. But that said, he had built himself back up. That's the part that doesn't really make much sense to me, where he had gone to NXT, put other people over, but also kind of reinvented himself as well, and they didn't even try. So if they had fired him a year and a half ago, I would say, you know what, it is what it is. They didn't really try, but it's like they just completely buried this guy, and it was at a point where, like with Ryback, like, I mean, Ryback's a nut at this point, but at the time, it's like, you know, it got to a point where I can't even bother to give a shit because there really wasn't coming back from how they just basically buried him. But I don't know, he got himself over again, Baron Corbin did, and he was back on the main roster, and they did nothing. So that's a bummer. But in conclusion here on that front, what do you see being next for all three individuals? Tegan Nox, Indi, Baron Corbin. Do you see all three of them or some of them continuing to pursue wrestling at all? Do you see them in TNA, AEW? Where do you see them going from here?
I think I see the women continuing in some, like I said, somewhere. Corbin, I don't know. He just screams such WWE guy. And I mean, honestly, if he never wrestled again, it wouldn't overly shock me.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I've seen a lot of people say, I mean, you know, he used to play for the NFL. I'm sure he's got money in the bank. You know, I mean, he literally did about, 10 years ago before he failed to cash in, but I'm sure he's going to be totally fine. I would actually like to see him in a TNA. I feel like he has, it's not like he's 50 either. I mean, the guy's like late 30s or whatever. Obviously a little bit older, but I feel like with the skill set that he's built up through NXT recently and whatnot, and the goodwill that he has with the audience, to see him pop up somewhere else would be cool. But I think safe to say, I mean, I don't see any of these individuals going to AEW, not because they don't deserve to go there, but because they've already brought in so many other people, and I just can't see, for as talented as Tegan is, I can't see them giving her much TV time. I just see her on fucking Rampage. I hate to say it, but it's true. Same with Indi. I think she could get a chance there. Would love to see it. I just don't see them doing that. And then with Corbin, he just does not fit AEW at all, and I just don't see that happening. So, yeah. Do you see any of these individuals in AEW, or is that a long shot?
I would say it's a long shot.
Yeah, probably not happening.
At that point, I feel like you're getting in like old TNA territory, just scrapping up all the like. It's not like they're like top guys, so it's like you're picking them up. I mean, you're really just scraping the bottom of the barrel. I feel like it comes off perception-wise. Like
in 2016, when they got rid of like Damian Sandow, he was the guy that WWE just creatively ruined. By the time when they let him go in 2016, it was like, what more is this guy gonna? And then I like Damian Sandow, not to bury the individual, but like by that point, it's like, all right, he's kind of done as far as being like someone of value to bring into another company. Yet he debuted in TNA anyway, and they gave him the Liberace gimmick, the Liberace, or whatever the fuck it is. Liberace gimmick, and it went absolutely nowhere with Rockstar Spud, and they fired him, or he left within a year. So I think it's the whole, what's Karen Bourbon doing in the Impact Zone? It's like that whole thing, you know?
No, I get, like I said, especially where AEW is now, like they're more established. I mean, at first, like obviously when they brought like Andrade and Miro, I still think they needed more of the star power. And now it's like you keep bringing these retreads. It just looks like Like I said, it's like TNA. I feel it just gives TNA vibes.
Dude, if this was 5 years ago and AEW was just getting started, then absolutely. But, like, obviously it's a very different landscape now. Like, you have to remember, I'm constantly reminded of this, and he had a meltdown during election night on Tuesday night on Twitter. Jake Hager, the former Jack Swagger, WWE, or rather AEW, brought him in as the big debut at the end of their first ever Dynamite. Like, think about that. If he debuted today, first of all, they probably wouldn't bring him in. If he got fired today, there's no fucking chance they would bring him in. But, like, if Baron Corbin was in Swagger's spot in 2017, I guarantee you he would have been the guy to close that show instead of Jack fucking Swagger. He's one of the most mid guys of the last 15 years.
Yeah, he was so bad at the end. I mean, the fact he was employed as long as he was crazy. I mean, I know he's friends with Jericho, but oh my god.
Did you see him call Tony Khan a communist the other day on Twitter? And then he deleted the tweet anyway.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess you can't see it now because he deleted it, but I guess he obviously had a little too much of the bubbly from his friend Jericho, and he just went nuts on Twitter during the whole election night thing. But yeah, no, the fact that he was employed for 5 years by that company, and I'm not saying they should have fired him, but the fact that he was there for as long as he was, and they only just recently let his contract lapse and not brought him back earlier this year. But yeah, Jericho just kept saving him, whether it be Inner Circle or Jericho Appreciation Society. He just kept getting by. But yeah, it was a bummer to hear about those releases, and hopefully they all do well in their, no pun intended, future endeavors.